Hey, this is Chris Mitzi and you're listening to Radio Carrum. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey, this is Saffire-Rose Fletcher, and you are listening to They Say I Think Too Much on Radio Carrum. Hi, I'm Saffire-Rose, and welcome to my 4th episode of my podcast, They Say I Think Too Much. Today's episode is called Thoughts versus Perception of Self via the Means of Social Influence. Someone's opinion of you, whether negative or positive, can sometimes determine how you perceive yourself. A simple comment can linger and swirl around in your subconscious for years without any awareness. It can also influence your decision-making skills going forward. Pre-warning, I'll be using the word opinion a lot throughout this podcast. Sorry in advance. Look, I didn't go to school, guys, and there's no other word that delivers the context in which I'm seeking for my overall message. I'll use celebrities for my first example. Just look at all the opinions formed as judgment on people we've never met. We don't know these people, yet some of us feel compelled to judge them based on a rumour or current headline that's circulating in the media. Imagine having people you've never met hating on you based on a fabricated storyline, just to paint you in a negative light for clickbait. People make a living of forming opinions of others, and it can perpetuate via the means of something as simple as a photo that's been taken of them in a relaxed setting. A shot taken of them with their eyes half closed, proclaiming that they are high. Sometimes I'll be scrolling on my phone and I'll come across posts regarding celebrities. You'll find forums filled with opinions. Someone always prefers their idol a certain way, or dislikes a celebrity because they are allegedly off the wagon yet again. It can happen based on a simple photo that's been completely taken out of context. Yet an opinion is formed. I saw a post with someone criticising another person's choice of hairstyle, leaving fellow commenters to throw the hate back at the original poster's comment regarding their appearance. It's a ripple effect and everyone has something to say, right? I saw a quote the other day that I absolutely love. It went along the lines of this: ask yourself, if you had the opportunity to be the person who is criticising you, would you swap lives with them? Majority will say no, not because they aren't enough or living a good life, but to be someone who is putting other people down in order to get a rise. What kind of life is that? If they were really happy and living a good life, they wouldn't resort to body shaming or shaming in any manner. So that's something to consider whenever you choose to carry the opinions of others. Some opinions have positive impact and may enhance your life, and some simply serve only but a sad reflection of someone who is completely miserable. You dispose of that information as if it were rubbish, because that's all it is. It's an easy choice. I'm going to touch on my own experience in the music industry the past 11 years. A lot of the feedback changed the trajectory of my life and even my songwriting, and not in the form of inspiration. Sometimes it led me astray. I once prophesied that an expansive vocabulary in music would be relevant 5 years from now. I was right. However, the team I was surrounded by and the advice from my peers informed me otherwise, stating that people needed my lyrics to be simplified. I had to simplify my writing in order for people to ascertain what I was detailing lyrically. I always said, can't they just use Google? That's how I improved my vocabulary. But it was dismissed and deemed irrelevant for that time period. Now, some of the biggest songwriters in the world have written major hits, including words that aren't used from the English dictionary as much as they should be used. And I love it. I can't help but wonder if I had have bypassed the opinions and advice from other people's observations and advice, where would I be today in all matters regarding music? Recently, I wrote a song called A Ghost of My Former Self that will be released this year. I wrote it about my experience in the music industry and the outside opinions of others regarding my preferences and the direction of where my music was heading. As it was always being challenged, but not always constructively. Don't get me wrong, I had an amazing team, but my vision felt very undermined at times due to the outdated preferences of others. People weren't ready for change during that time period. They were stuck in an era that didn't energetically complement my style. Same applies with appearance. What someone else might prefer in relation to style, an external form of expressionism, might not be relevant to your own sense of taste. Which is more than okay. However, when people say, I like you better with this hairstyle, or you wear too much black, some of us get caught up in our own heads of how to please said individual, especially if we are raised with an urge to people please. I found throughout my entire career that I could never satisfy anyone, but the ones who understood my style and direction musically would resonate with the intention I originally strived for, which ultimately is what I do this for, to help other people feel less alone regarding many demographics. Another example I'll make is something I've experienced recently, being sober, choosing a different path for myself in social settings. I was so worried that some people would find me boring for not partaking in social vices in general settings. I also drank and numbed my social anxiety with a quick fix to reduce my nervousness and furthermore to buffer my surroundings because I didn't want to feel uncomfortable. It wasn't until I realized why I was partaking in that form of activity where I discovered I didn't need a vice. I just needed to establish what aligns with me energetically and what doesn't. I never understood that I had a choice of asking myself, does this feel right? Are these my people? I just accepted whatever company I could attain for myself and normalized the discomfort with, it'll make me more confident, which it did. But when I woke up the next day, I knew that I wasn't aligned with my most authentic self and I couldn't be more further from my path than I had anticipated. I'm finding the stigma surrounding sobriety can sometimes be met with awkwardness, like, it's not normal, you're a party pooper. When really, you are just wanting to look after your mind and body, but also engage with people in a more authentic manner. Otherwise, how are you to know if the company you are keeping is even healthy for you, or if you're even showing up as your most best self when meeting new people? These days, I feel more confident regarding social interaction. Ironic, huh? But it took a lot of therapy on my part and inner questioning on what I do and why I do it. Introspection isn't for the weak. Many years ago, the stigmas attached to words such as sobriety used to deter me. I could never use that word, nor the word addiction, because of people's opinions around the subject matter. Now I'm not afraid to say I'm sober. If anything, I speak so freely on the topic that it feels liberating. I'm no longer afraid of how I'll be perceived, because I understand the lack of education that some people may have on this particular matter. I find most opinions are formed based on a lack of life experience. Nobody can understand anything until they've lived it themselves. For example, I was in a relationship with a very good soul 5 years ago, whom suffered immense chronic pain. Although I sympathised and felt bad for her most days, I'm ashamed to admit this, but there was a stage where I felt like she was just constantly complaining and not doing anything about the issue. Hear me out. Since having 2 major rib surgeries and a kneecap replacement, in my mid-30s mind you, I now understand the pain she was in. Again, experience is our teacher. The same applies to career prospects, as briefly touched on prior. We should always ask ourselves, am I doing this to appease my family and peers? Or does this genuinely make me happy? A question I've recently had to ask myself because my music had always been deemed as unsuccessful and financially unfulfilling. Now, I understand some people have families to feed and other life obstacles that require a certain position regarding this topic. But for those who have some freedom of choice on this matter, sometimes cop the worst flack because of the career avenue they are choosing and its unlikely success rate. It might not feel realistic to someone else. But to the person pursuing such an avenue might find immense happiness in the fact, even if it makes no sense to someone else. I myself think life is too short, and some people think we take life too seriously. Yet it all applies, it's just how you choose to perceive it. For example, this podcast. When I embarked on a new venture with They Say I Think Too Much and studying radio. As I started to release a couple of episodes from this podcast, I was met with opinions and advice on how to be better at public speaking from people with no experience in the field. That doesn't minimize the value of their opinions though. However, when in retrospect, I was merely learning the ropes. I never proclaimed to be an expert, more so an amateur, just learning the ropes, in which I still am. Yes, listeners have every right to provide feedback, especially if I'm talking too fast. But again, I was just starting out, it's an entirely different industry for me, which is something that I had already addressed before commencing this show. In my mind, I was hoping to receive feedback on the actual content rather than my verbal approach to the overall commentary. I was also met with opinions on how deeply I tend to think, bypassing the point of this podcast in the first place. So these days I'm learning what thoughts to absorb as healthy and dismiss the thoughts that were irrelevant to what I was trying to achieve. Opinions can either be constructive or simply just an unsolicited request to alter something to meet someone else's expectations or preferences. You either talk too slow or too fast. And if you're finding a balance, some people will find fault with another factor of your work, which could be in relation to your content. Again, I think too much. For a different sense of perspective on the topic of how fast I talk, I had a few people message me stating that they had ADHD and felt less alone with their struggles. Although I hadn't been formally diagnosed with ADHD, I'm pretty sure I have it, but hey, people stated that the pace in which I spoke really appealed to them as their brain operates at that level of speed, which again, I can relate to. It helped me consider the various demographics that I could accommodate to going forward. So again, that's another form of approaching opinions, because in someone else's mind, I'm speaking way too fast, when in fact, I might be accommodating to someone who might need to hear what I have to say on that day at a speed in which they find fitting for their circumstances. It's how you reframe it. Also regarding how my mind works in conjunction to how someone else's mind works. I'm either overthinking, or to someone else, I'm raising necessary awareness on a subject matter and potentially contributing to solving a social issue. These things require extensive thought. Personally, I've found that in most of my endeavors, that if I'm not learning something from each situation that I'm in, I'm not growing and I become stagnant. I want to expand. I want to evolve. I'd be bored otherwise. I'm a very curious individual that cares about people and how their brains operate. It's okay if others don't crave the same desires as me. They might be coming from an entirely different perspective that accommodates to whatever circumstances or desires they may attain. And on another perspective, on matters of the heart. Have you ever liked someone so much that you would do anything just to grab their attention based on what they are attracted to or what they favor, whether it be style, hair, makeup, career prospects, financial matters, and values? I know I have. I'm sure we all have at some point in our lives. I've molded myself, attempted to enjoy things that I didn't, and became a qualified contortionist throughout my journey of life in order to fit someone else's comfort zone and ideals. That's on me, however. I chose that. Because accepting that the person that I truly cared for potentially wouldn't like me back as a result of being myself was a tough possibility for me to grasp at that time period. I too have had people attempt to change themselves for me based on my own preferences and desires, so they'd alter their opinions on previous disinterest and distaste just to appease me, which eventually I started to recognize and encourage them to choose what felt authentic for them, not what I favored. It's a journey of self-exploration. It's difficult at the best of times, but rewarding when you finally distinguish the difference between what needs to be consumed between the noise of everyone else's input and your own inner compass guiding you to your most highest self. There comes a time when you outgrow the need to chase what isn't meant for you and a desire to attract what feels more in alignment with what is meant for you, which ultimately progresses with age. Just how our opinions tend to alter as we progress via the means of lived experience. For example, a lot of my previous opinions in my published books have altered throughout my development. I cannot entirely commit to the certain beliefs that I once attained. Sometimes opinions formed of us via the means of other people can lead us to having intrusive and negative thoughts about ourselves. We tend to internally process our thoughts in a non-constructive manner and personalize them, which ultimately isn't healthy for our well-being. So what are the ways in which opinions can constitute as productive? It depends on the nature of the opinion. It's important to remember that opinions are not your reality. Someone may see you as a certain character when in fact you couldn't be further from the idea that they have of you. Or you might have been that particular character many years ago. Though people can and do change, it's relevant to anything in life. Again, look at all the celebrities most of us judged in the early stages of our development because we knew no better. My mum would always tell me to think twice before judging because God forbid it was you, and you'd want someone to give you the benefit of the doubt. I always have carried this perspective with me. A version of you that was once your identity may not be relevant to who you are today. The questions we must always ask ourselves when faced with feedback from others: should I take their perception of me on board? And whatever the subject matter is it true? Would I be altering myself just to appease them or to improve myself? And is this in alignment with what I feel to be right? At the end of the day, as cliche as it may sound, you must choose yourself. And if it makes you happy, follow your own guidance, not the outside influences that have zero capacity to understand where you are coming from, as they have never lived your life, as you haven't theirs. Everybody is coming from a different perspective, and that's what makes the world a beautiful place, as chaotic as it can be at times. I always say, to each their own. Be you, be bold, think outside of the box, and don't allow anyone to dim your light. Until my next podcast, be kind to yourself. Hey, this is Saffire-Rose Fletcher, and you are listening to They Say I Think Too Much on Radio Carrum.
Hi, this is Naomi Libba, composer and vocalist. I'm here at Radio Carrum. They rock.
Hey, ST.
Yes,
If
mate.
you had a business, who would you use for your systems integration?
Look, I was thinking about this earlier on in the week, and I'd done a fair bit of homework on it, but the name that kept coming up was DB Results.
And GS, if you needed someone to improve your digital business transformation, who would you use?
Oh, without a doubt, I'd go straight to DB Results.
AC, digital solutions, you've got to improve it in your business. Who'd you go to?
Got to be DB Results, AA.
I tell you, DB Results, the right digital solutions for your business.
When the going gets tough.
Going gets tough.
When the going gets tough.
DB Results.
When the going gets tough.
DB Results. Well, there you go.